This podcast is hosted on podhome.fm, the most modern podcast hosting platform. Podhome offers unlimited episodes and podcasts, and unlimited use of Podhome AI, which generates transcripts, clips, chapters, title suggestions, show notes, and much more. And all of that for just $15.99 a month or $185 per year. That's a steal. So go to podhome.fm and start your 30-day trial now. And enjoy the show with Joe.
Transmitting live from the Asylum Studios, deep in the bowels of Southwest Texas. It's the Joe Ruse Show. The show where we talk about anything and everything. Where nothing is sacred, nothing is watered down, and nothing is PC.
Alrighty, hey folks, this is Joe Ruse, and it is great to be with you guys once again. And of course, as always, we are transmitting live from the Asylum, and we're going to do the very best we can to bring you the best quality talk radio we could muster without all the bluster. Welcome to the Joe Ruse Show. It is the 23rd of February, 2026. It is a beautiful Monday evening at 19:03 hours. Unbelievable. We are on a streak, folks. We have opened the show on time yet again. This is wild. Absolutely wild. Hey, okay, I got to ask. What do you think about the music? All right, some of you who have been watching and following the show for the last year or so might recognize that. That was the original opening music for our show. Back a year ago, back in November 24. That's how we started the thing, and it's much different than what we normally use, and it's like the energy is just completely different from it, right? It's a little more laid back, a little more relaxed. Usually we start, screaming and shouting and all that stuff when we get on here. But what do you think? Let me know. I'm curious. I might want to keep it in the rotation for a little while. I don't know. We'll see. We shall see for sure. All right. Well, guys, I hope you had a great weekend, and I hope you're ready for another week of episodes with some great guests that we have lined up, especially the one we have lined up for tonight. I'm looking forward to having a really, really interesting conversation with our guest this evening. But over the weekend, we had a lot of stuff going on here at the Asylum. We did a lot of work around here, changed a few things around, so hopefully, things are working okay. And, I hope you're able to catch the show yesterday. We did our Sunday show. We opened up our series. We did our Sunday Bible study show, and we opened up our series in the book of Revelation. Well, actually, no, it's the second episode. We did an intro the week before. But I hope you guys were able to check it out. If you haven't, it's available. Go check it out. Listen to it on wherever you get your podcast, or, if you want to watch it on Rumble, which we'd really appreciate. Or if for whatever reason you're still on YouTube, you can look at it over there too. You really do need to be coming to Rumble, by the way. Rumble is the free speech platform. You need to come to Rumble. All right. Now, and I say it because we don't know how much longer I'm going to be on YouTube. I already have my 2 strikes, and the other one's coming soon, I'm sure. So check it out on Rumble at rumble.com/Joe Ruse. It's right up there on the screen. Easy to find. It's free. Don't cost you nothing. The weather's beautiful here. It's 72 degrees, white billowy clouds, and that crystal blue sky. It's gorgeous. The water's a perfect temperature to go swimming. It is fantastic. So come to Rumble. Come to Rumble. All right. Let's see. So history. History isn't something that happened. It's something that is still happening. The decisions made 100 years ago, the wars, the alliances, the secrets, they didn't stay in the past. They shaped the world you and I are living in right now. But here's the question that most people never ask. What is the truth? What if the truth isn't just found in history books, but in hidden stories? Tonight, we're going to talk to a man who spent his life uncovering those truths through fiction, through mystery, and through the deeper question of who we really are. But before we do that, we're going to get into some of the housekeeping stuff. Folks, don't forget to head over to our website, joeruse.com, joeruse.com. And when you get over there, take a look around, especially go over to the contact section, open up that little web form, send us over a message. Let us know whatever's on your heart, whatever's on your mind, any questions, comments, cares, concerns that you might have. Maybe you have a complaint. You shouldn't have a complaint, but if you do, you can drop it in right there, and we will give it the just attention it deserves. Also, if you have a guest idea, a suggestion for a topic for discussion one night, let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys about it. Really, really does help as we plan out our shows. I have to get better with preparing in case a guest doesn't show up. So it'll be good to have something in the old arsenal. All right. So if you don't want to use the web form, totally fine. Just email me directly at info@joeroos.com. That's info@joeroos.com. Or you can drop a comment right down there below on Rumble or on YouTube, and we will make sure that we get to those things. Also, folks, please remember, this is a live show, weeknights at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. Also, we have our Saturday shows with our resident crypto psychic on Saturday, every other Saturday at noon. And then, of course, we have our Sunday show every Sunday at 2 p.m. Central Time. And don't forget, it's very, very important. Got to mess with the algorithm here. So you got to like, subscribe, and share with your friends, your family, and your followers. That way you'll help us to spread the show, get more traction, get more people watching, get more people involved, and which is what we want to do. All right. So let's make sure we do that. Remember, like, subscribe, and share with your friends, your family, and your followers. All right. Now, also, tonight's guest is, or our connection tonight is brought to you by Podmatch. Most podcast hosts and guests spend hours researching connections, coordinating interviews, and working on administrative tasks while really only spending about 10% of their time on what really matters. And that's bringing you impactful episodes, impactful interviews, impactful shows. Now, Podmatch enables guests and hosts to reclaim that time through automations and streamlined processes so they can focus on creating content that really serves its listeners. To find out more information about Podmatch, just head over to podmatch.com/member/Joe. Right up there on the screen, in the show notes down below, podmatch.com/member/Joe. And you can find out more about becoming a member of Podmatch. And if you do, you never know. You might end up being a guest on this show at some point, and we would love to have you. So it's podmatch.com/member/Joe. All right. Now, tonight, we are going to be joined here right now by Gerald Everett Jones, an award-winning novelist with 11 books under his belt, 10 literary awards across multiple genres. He writes mystery thrillers, literary fiction that dig into identity, history, and the ripple effects of war and empire. His latest novel, Jonathan's Journal, begins with a discovered diary and unfolds into a story tied to World War I British influence in India and the Middle East. He's a member of the Writers Guild of America, the Dramatists Guild, Film Independent, and serves as a director of the Independent Writers of Southern California. Gerald, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Joe. Pleasure to be with you this evening.
It's great. I was looking forward to this. I got up to speed on your book and Jonathan's Journal, and I am very interested in getting to hear more about it. And I hope we can have a few laughs along the way too, sir.
Well, you nailed the theme right. Reading between the lines in the history books. That's really what I want to talk about.
Outstanding. So then, before we get into all of the serious stuff, what's
Do we ever have to?
No, we don't have to. Well, let's see. Let's see how we answer the icebreaker questions. So, what is something that you pretend to understand but really don't?
I might be able to pretend that I understand calculus because I understand what it's about. I could never use it.
Okay. My answer would have been women. I try. I do.
I can't say that on here.
I'll admit it. I'm a single guy, so I can say it.
Well, I'm happily married the second time, but there have been actually incidents and episodes that have appeared in many of my books. And I won't be able to say which are closer to what actually happened and others which might have been very liberally fictionalized.
Fair enough. We'll leave it there. That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, what's one thing that people would be surprised to learn about you in the first 5 minutes of meeting you?
They would be surprised to learn that I once had more hair.
You don't look like you don't have hair.
My hair has thinned a lot, but every time I flip on the television and I see, let's say, a spokesperson from, well, we're going to talk perhaps about the Middle East, and I see somebody from India, I go, I wish I had that hair again.
Okay.
I mean, now it's the fat. I mean, it used to be like, you would like comb it back, or
Hmm.
you would trim it, whatever. But now it's like you're wearing it like I don't know, a mullet or a pile up here. It's like I could never do that. I mean, I don't understand. I don't get it.
My dad used to call it an area rug.
A what?
An area rug.
Well, a rug, yes, a rug. My lord, there are so many of our distinguished people in public life who um, may actually have a throw rug on top.
It's very possible. I think more than we probably care to admit. So, yeah.
I had a very good friend, and I actually wrote a novel about his life story. He was a victims' rights attorney,
Okay.
and he was often involved in like wrongful death stuff with the cops and that kind of thing. But every time I would see Leon, I said, you must go to the barber shop like every week because, your hair never changes. He never admitted. He said, yeah, I do take good care of it.
Well, if you really want to test out the theory, what you can do is very, very simple. Just if somebody you suspect, because I've done this, I'm not going to say I didn't.
Uh-oh.
I'm not going to say I didn't do it without repercussion, um, but I'll go up to somebody and say, "Hey, number 35 is out of place," and just watch the reaction. Sometimes they laugh, sometimes they swing. It depends.
Oh, my.
Depends on how, I guess, and how well you know them. I don't know.
That sounds like a great scene opener for a book. So
Hey,
don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if I use it someday.
hey, feel free, no problem. So you've written 11 novels. What made you decide that storytelling was your lane in life?
This one's the 15th. You must have read an old press release. But okay.
What?
What was the question again?
You've written 15 novels.
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
The awards are up to about 20, but who's counting?
Okay, well, you have to update your Podmatch profile then, because that's where I got it from. So,
Really?
yes, sir.
I wasn't aware I had a Podmatch profile, but
Yes,
okay.
sir. So, I think your publicist runs it for you, Lou. So,
Oh,
so
take her to the woodshed.
yeah, there you go. So, 15 novels now. What made you decide that storytelling was your lane?
I won my first writing award in fourth grade. I lived in Kansas City, Missouri, and my essay was called Why Most People Like Tom Sawyer.
Interesting.
And I won 2 tickets to the Wizard of Oz stage show. And I didn't have a girlfriend to take, so I took my friend from the Boy Scouts.
Okay.
And then in sixth grade, I won the Scholastic Schaefer short story competition. This was before Harry Potter, so Scholastic magazines was just like this pulp rag. That's unfair, but Scholastic Shaver Writing Award, and my short story was called The Mayor's Secretary. Now I'm going to reluctantly date myself. This was 1960, and computers they took up like big rooms and had to have air conditioning, and they were fed with punch cards, and I actually here I was in the sixth grade, and I wrote this short story about a mayor who got tired of his female secretary, data sexist right away, got tired of his female secretary, fired her, and hired a computerized robot, and then begged to have the secretary back because the robot started smoking his cigars.
Okay.
So very deeply, not only tech, but Freudian.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
would agree with
no,
that.
really.
Absolutely.
way ahead of my time. So
I
then
was gonna say,
my dad was a scientist, engineer, and uh, made it very clear he wanted me to be a research scientist.
okay.
And I got into high school. I'd been very much a kind of you would these days you would say STEM student. Got into high school, and somehow it occurred to me that writers might get more girls. Now that was never true, but somehow I got on that wagon and I never jumped off. So, and then I was in I was in a program at Wesleyan University called the College of Letters, and this was before they had a film department. I missed being a member of what is now called the Wesleyan Mafia because there's so many people in the business that are from my school, but they didn't have a film department when I was there. So, you know, I could have been a contender, right? So, but yeah, no, I also in college I did minor in theater, and I did a fair amount of acting, and I even did a season of summer stock. And one of the things that I found that when I got out of school and I tried to get work as an actor was this is going to be tough because I got to wait for the script to come to me.
Mhm.
It's got to occur to somebody that I fit here. And also, I mean, yeah, you can say, you know, Star could pick and choose among the parts, and you know, this is me, this is not me, this is okay for my reputation, this is not whatever. First, I found out that it was a whole lot more fun to play villains; they were a whole lot more interesting. But the other thing was that I just, you know, I couldn't even get arrested as a scene painter. Okay, so then I fell back on the writing, and the other thing that occurred to me was, you know, if I write the script, I have to play all the parts. I get to play all the parts.
That's an interesting take.
And one of the things that occurred to me also, and I've said this before, and I hope um, Joaquin Phoenix forgives me, but I think he's a really good example of how an actor, as much as anybody on the planet, understands that anybody's capable of anything. You know, I mean, you know, you might be, you know, among the canon of saints, but I mean, you know, even there, you know, Jimmy Carter, I send in my heart, that one.
Mhm.
But you know, consider Joaquin is a vegan, an activist, an incredibly shy person.
Mhm.
How does the Joker come out of that personality?
That's a good point.
And yet that's not what actors would call it. Now, you know, Laurence Olivier, that was called technique. Okay, you know, he could be reciting you know, whatever in his head and be playing, you know, Hamlet at the same time. But that school of acting is kind of over with
Mhm.
because people in the extreme close up of today's movie making, the slightest twitch of an eyebrow will give you away. And actually, that was what was said of Garbo back in the day. Was that I believe it was George Cukor said, you know, I would give her instruction, and somehow, and we'd do take after take, and I would go, uh, I just didn't see it. I guess I didn't get it from her. And then we go over the dailies. It would be there. It would be there 30 feet wide on the screen. So subtlety is, and you notice it also in dialogue, is that very, in Hollywood today, very few scenes are longer than 2.5 pages.
Mhm.
Things just move very fast, very fast. And audiences, long speeches, actors don't like to give them, directors don't like to give them. And it's all clip, clip, clip. And one of the things that William Goldman said in his Actors and Screen Trade book was understand that stars really hate long speeches. And what they hate most of all are explanations. A star doesn't want to give you the plan. He doesn't want to say, first we pull up to the bank, and then the backup runs out, and then I come out with the weapons, and you make sure you've got everybody on the floor. No, the opponent ally, the the sidekick, if you will, of the star, the one who is mostly on his side but will argue with him if he disagrees. That's the opponent ally. The opponent ally will explain the plan, and then Steve McQueen will say, "Let's do it." And one of the things I think that it was Jodie Foster said, that's what the audience will remember. They're not going to remember anything that the other guy said, but they're going to remember not the line. They're going to remember the emotion that was right behind McQueen when he said, "Let's do it." Make my day. Another telling example of just the sheer steel of that guy in that moment.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And it's interesting because you mentioned, now that you mention that those scenes are cut short and such. Now that you mentioned, I'm thinking about all the movies that I've seen and I've watched, and you're absolutely right. There really aren't any lengthy dialogue scenes. Like I'm partial to. I love movies based off of Shakespeare. I love watching Olivier. I love Kenneth Branagh. I think he's an incredible actor. And
He is.
you don't see aside from those types of movies, you don't see that type of dialogue. And even those movies, they edit out a lot of the dialogue and shorten some of
Well,
the
there might
scenes.
be a set piece. I mean, the opening of Patton,
Yeah,
which is not really a necessarily a modern movie. It's something done in the old style. But him addressing his troops. There will be that type of scene in some movies,
hmm
and often it'll be in the scene that precedes the battle. Okay, you've got the quiet time in the camp at night before the battle in the morning. Usually, that's the time that Caesar addresses the troops, or the inspirational Henry II, that kind of stuff.
yeah. Actually, I was thinking about that too. You mentioned Henry II, Henry V. Actually, uh, great, great lengthy dialogue before the battle is on St. Crispin's Day. That incredible speech. I mean, I read it or I watch it, and I get fired up and ready to charge.
Was it Branagh Branagh? That was one role
That
that
was
he
one that
played.
Branagh did. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's what I thought.
yeah,
I was kind of visualizing him when you said it.
yeah, an excellent, excellent movie. Very well done, and early on. And actually, there's a young Christian Bale in that movie as well. He
They
plays
all had to start
he
someplace.
plays one of the drummer boys. It was really. I was watching it one day. I was like, hey, wait a second, isn't that Batman? Hey. So let me ask you. Uh, with your writing, were you always drawn to history, or was that something that kind of developed as you grew older?
I've really only written two historical novels. Jonathan's Journal is one.
Mhm.
And I wrote another one called Bonfire of the Vanderbilts that took me a very long time to research. And that was in the days really before online searches. I did the research back then using fax machines and exchanging emails.
Mhm.
And I would do an interlibrary loan through the library, and they would send me the microfilm, and I would sit at the microfilm meter. So it took me about 20 years. I mean, I wasn't doing it full time. I had, day job, but I was really intrigued with this painting called the Baptism, which used to hang in LACMA, and it may come back with the new gallery. We'll see. But it's an enormous painting, 10 feet wide. And there's 21 people in it. And the museum card said this may be a branch of the Vanderbilt family, but nobody knows for sure. And it's this Victorian drawing room, and it's a christening, and all these elegant people there. And I thought, well, why can't anybody figure this out? I mean, the Vanderbilts are, there's been a lot written about them, whatever. So I thought, okay, I'll drill into this. I'll have the answer in a couple of weeks.
Hmm.
Well, it took a very long time. And it turned out that there was a very good reason why Cornelius Vanderbilt never wanted anybody on the planet to know that that ceremony had happened in his house. And it turned out that it was a very famous location, not in Paris, as the painting seemed to suggest. It was in Newport, Rhode Island. But the other problem was that the house that was in was the wooden structure that he had bought from Pierre Lorillard, and that burned down. So all of the evidence, and there's a new big, big house on that site on Ochre Point. But so anyhow, there was that. But I learned historical research. I mean, I learned historical research in college, but I learned historical research in doing that book. And then, I've always been fascinated by history. And this book, excuse me, this book took off, and actually goes some years back. After my mother passed away, I got a box of her things, and she was a collector. That my folks lived in London for a while, and she would go to the antique stores, the flea markets, and one of the things in the box was this old volume. It was a red leather covered leatherette book that was when it was new, it was a blank, diary, ruled pages, and it was written. It was almost filled with this elegant black cursive handwriting, and also some newspaper clippings that had been stuck in there, mostly photographs. And it sat on my shelf for a long time. I don't, but one day I just took it out and I thought, well, maybe I'll try to read it. Well, it was hard to read because the calligrapher, this is from 1919. And it turned out that this was a soldier's diary from World War I. And he makes it pretty clear that he had carried a pocket diary with him through the war. So it was pretty clear that he must have hired somebody to transcribe it and perhaps even dictate it to them from his notes, as it were. And I thought, wow, is this going to turn out to be an original Churchill? Because there was just some initials on it. It was an anonymous diary. It had a picture of the guy. And then, I had some researchers who were helping me. And we went back into the war records, and based on his regiment and his assignments and some of the facts he gives, we tried to find him in the British war records. And they are quite comprehensive. We couldn't find it. And of course, maybe that was the box that burned. And the diary had it was a numbered volume. It turned out that the outfit that sold the blank volumes actually had a serial number. And I wrote to them, W. Pollard's in London. The outfit's still there. They must still make leather-bound diaries. And they said, we'd really be happy to help you, but all our records from that era were destroyed in the V2 bombing in World War II. Oh, wow. So that was gone. Then as I got into the story, now I'm really in it. I'm in the weeds. And the thing that really got to me was the fact that as I got early into it, I realized this guy had missed most of the war. He really didn't see any action until 1917, and the war was practically over by then. At least I thought that was the case. And the more I got into the book, and the book is titled Memoirs of My Travels East. And he talks about his desire to see what was then Mesopotamia, which is now Iraq, Palestine and Iraq, and India, these British possessions. And he was kind of implying, I signed up because, I'm going to take this paid vacation on on the king's expense, and I probably won't ever face a bullet, and it'll be fun. Well, yes and no, because his diary read like an officer's field report. And you know from your background with people who are law enforcement, military, whatever, they're just they're trained to give you the facts, just the facts, and only the facts you need to know.
Right.
And so that's how this guy wrote his personal diary. I'm thinking he's going to talk about, I hooked up with her here and I hooked up with her there, and I bought this and I smoked this and I drank that, and none of that. It was, I went here, I ate that. I hung out with the fellows here. We saw this, on the way, saw the Sphinx. Okay. It's like my dad took, I grew up in the Midwest. My dad took us on a road trip. The first time we saw California, I think I was 12 years old, and it was in the middle of the afternoon. He takes us into this hillside place, and we park in the parking lot. We walk all the way in, and here's this big auditorium and a stage that had kind of a white background, and there was nobody there. There was nobody there at all. And my dad stood up in front of us and he said, "That's the Hollywood Bowl." So that's how this guy, my dad's the engineer. It's like, he's not going to say, "Do you know who played here?" He's not going to give you the subtext. He's just going to say, "I went here, I did that. I went here, I did that." So I was thinking, there's really no story here. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. That's impossible, because number one, there has to be a reason he was sent to the Middle East, and then to India. And number two, why didn't anybody mention this in school? I thought World War I. I mean, I saw the Spielberg movie, and I saw, the Thin Red Line, and I saw All Quiet on the Western Front. I know that it was French trench warfare. Okay, it was trenches, and actually, I had a relative who died at Argonne Forest. I was told my middle name, Everett, is from Everett Jones, died at Argonne Forest. And so I've seen the movies. Well, the thing about that period of history is all they had was newspapers. Even radio was in its very, very, very early stages. And people would read about the war. People in England would read about the war. It was like reading the scores from the baseball game. They lost this many, we lost this many. We lost this battle, we won that battle.
Right.
And there would be debates in Parliament about, should we do this, should we do that? To some extent, there was some geopolitics mixed in there. But as I got into researching the book, I thought, well, okay, if just simply republishing this book as nonfiction, which I could get the rights to do, and I did. I mean, it turns out it's actually not public domain. But I optioned the rights, and then I bought the rights. I realized, just setting this down as nonfiction, frankly, this is a snore. And I thought, what if a character who's kind of an introvert, not at all like myself, somebody in the present day, let's make him a college professor. And let's also make this during COVID. He's during lockdown. He's shut in at home. So he's focusing on this, and he just can't bring himself to write his sabbatical paper. Okay, it's work avoidance. He's going to do everything but that. So here's my project. This will be my hobby. I'm going to dive into this. So he dives into it, and he starts imagining what would go between the lines. Plus, also, he walks into one thing he's allowed to do is to walk into the local public library and reference desk. And of course, as in any work of fiction, there's a gorgeous lady sitting there. And not only is she an expert in naval history, but she's also, it turns out, and it takes him a while to learn, She was in the diplomatic corps in the Ukraine before she lost her job. And as you may know, the ambassador there got kicked out.
Right.
And so she could not, even though she was a Ukrainian, she was a Russian English translator. And as far as the new administration was concerned at the embassy, she was not to be trusted. So, Rand Corporation happens to be over here in Santa Monica, think tank. It's like, so she comes over here. She has a good interview. She thinks that she's got a new job at Rand, doesn't get the job. So here she is marking time at the reference desk at Santa Monica Public Library, and she's Jonathan's new best friend. Well, the other problem, not problem, but the other situation with Jonathan is the fellow's been anonymous. For some reason, he's not putting his name on this book. Is that because he signed the Official Secrets Act and he can't say where he was?
Right.
But all he's got is his initials. They're JFW. Well, this guy's initials happen to be JFW, and like me, he, the idea of having found this in his mother's trunk, his mother having passed away, seems perhaps more than coincidental. He doesn't know that much about his own family history. Maybe this was my grandfather or my great grandfather or my mom's boyfriend, or I now I really have to find out whether this is me. And then it comes out in the book as we find out that his mother actually lived with him during the early part of COVID. Is that she was slipping into dementia, and he stepped up as caregiver because her husband was gone. He had no siblings. And so if you can imagine an introverted young fellow basically living with a female who's kind of Betty Davis, ragging on him all the time. And what, the one thing that they find in common is they can watch old movies together. And she's come back from London, and he was what they call, and Jonathan, the professor, he's kind of a trust fund baby. It's like he makes enough from his professorship, but in fact, he probably could have wasted the rest of his life. But he's a trust fund baby, and his much older father has died much more previously. But he's a fellow he never found out what his father did. His father was somehow in international finance or something, but had projects in South Africa. I mean, his father was British. So, wherever the empire was, his father was in South Africa, his father was in India, his father was in the Middle East, but my father never talked about what he did. So that's a big mystery right there, too. Well, she was what they call, and this is a real thing I've been told, she was what they call a gentleman's woman. Now, she was an American, but she had been with a brokerage, and she was accepted to transfer to the London office. Well, there she met this fellow, Jonathan's father, who was a rich CEO of something, and a gentleman's woman in the brokerage business is a very attractive younger woman who has only one client, a rich, horny old guy. And so naturally, he married his broker. But his mother freely admits she was a trophy wife. So, I mean, she can't, her two favorite movies are Rebecca and now Voyager. And the only thing that she knows is that she doesn't know the directors of those movies, but she knows that Ori Kelly dressed both Betty Davis and Olivia de Havilland. So, and it turns out my cousin on my mother's side, same mother, my mother was much kinder than Betty Davis. But it had to make it interesting. My mother's, he was my cousin. I don't really know what his relation is to my mother. He's my great aunt's daughter's son. He was dean of the School of Fashion Design at Brooks College out here. And he was amazing. I mean, he dressed some of the stars. I mean, Celeste Holm and Zsa Zsa Gabor. And he said, yeah. And I said, wow, Jack, that's really impressive. And he says, oh, yeah, never got a buck for it. I said, what do you mean? He says, my payback is the next cocktail party they go to. Oh, I'm wearing a Jack Payne. So I would imagine that's what still goes on, you know, the swag bags and all that other stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. So I modeled some of that after Jack. He did know. I was introduced. I don't remember the fellow's name. I was when I was in my younger years, he introduced me to this fellow who was he was head of the Department of Textiles at Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And it turns out that that department, way before there was a museum of film, all of the dresses from the old movies were donated by the studios to the museum and to the textiles department. And he was the curator for all that stuff. And since that time, they've had all these shows that are just full of mannequins dressed by, this is what Olivia de Havilland wore in this particular movie. So there was that. And knowing about, I mean, I've been something of a fan of Hollywood history and an admirer and a critic of Mr. Spielberg at times. And I studied digital film production and studied directing and kind of been there and done that with some of the technologies we mentioned, video editing and some of the digital stuff. And so that's been great fun as well. But yeah, that and I basically I found out in writing that book that I never learned the real cause of World War I.
And you still don't know.
I'll share it with you if you spoiler alert.
Why not?
The real cause of World War I, we were taught in school that there were two causes. Interlocking directorates, which meant there were treaties among all the European powers because they were all rivals with each other. And it was like, well, okay, if I'm attacked, you're going to come in with me.
Right.
And so there were all these interlocking agreements. And then the other trigger point was the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand, and he was heir to the Austrian throne, and he was assassinated by a Serbian student. Okay, none of those things really mattered in terms of the starting of the war. The starting of the war had to do with what everybody at the time in both London and in Berlin and in Paris, at least in those places, also in Istanbul, known then as Constantinople, understood as the Eastern Question. And the Eastern Question was that everybody knew that the Turkish Empire was in serious decline. They were running out of money. For centuries, they had been run by a royal family that was losing its grip. And really nobody bought royalty and harems and any of this stuff in the early 20th century. And the question was, when Turkey goes down, who's going to come in to fill that void? Now, it would have been logical for the British to do it because, I mean, they had been in India since the time of Queen Elizabeth, since the time of Shakespeare. They also had a sizable presence with the British Navy in the Mediterranean and in what would be called Mesopotamia at the time. And the Germans didn't particularly like that because why should we let the Britons run the world? The other thing that had happened was that the French had been building this thing called the Suez Canal since around 1879, something like that. And the problem was the Prussians, before there were Germans, they were called Prussians, had attacked Paris in the 1870s, 1880s. and very nearly destroyed the city. And they would have taken over France if the Kaiser hadn't just kind of gotten tired of spending all the money and just recalled everybody because he thought the French had been weakened enough. Well, the problem with the French was they were building this big ambitious canal and they ran out of dough, so because of that war. And so the British investors came in. These were the investors at the time, not the British government. The British investors came in, and actually there's a movie called Disraeli, one of the very early talkies. It was a play before that called Disraeli with George Arliss that actually dramatizes how Prime Minister Disraeli convinced the Bank of England to loan him $5 million to buy the Suez Canal. So the British basically owned and controlled the Suez Canal. They made their peace with the French by saying, well, you can manage it with us. You started, okay, fine, you can manage it. So, but the main cause of the war was something that I had never heard of, not in any history book I ever read, was the Berlin-to-Baghdad Railway. Germany planned to build a railway between Berlin and Baghdad.
Right.
Well, that would go right through Serbia. It would go right through the top of Italy into Syria, down through what was Palestine at the time, cut into Mesopotamia, which is Iraq now. But the upshot of that project would be it would connect the port of Rotterdam in the North Sea with Basra, which is at the tip of the Persian Gulf. So there would be a direct German-controlled route from the North Sea and the Atlantic all the way to the Persian Gulf. And the British thought this was actually a great idea. Investors were lining up to invest in the German railway until the British Navy figured out, wait a minute, that route is beyond the range of British gunboats. They're going to bypass the Suez Canal. They're going to take away not only Mesopotamia, they're going to get over there to India, and they're going to mess with us they're going to take away Singapore and Hong Kong, and so that was the cause of the war.
Wow.
And it was still being fought in 1917. There were all kinds of campaigns. Now the Turks had hooked up with the Germans, and that was something of a survival ploy. Is okay, if there's going to be a new empire, let's hook up with the Austria-Hungarian Germans, because they'll probably rule the world if they take it away from the Brits. The Brits have never liked us, so let's do that. And my wife's ancestors, who had been in Rhodes, they had been Sephardic Jews who had been offered asylum in Rhodes. The Turks actually treated the Jews pretty nice, even from one of the reasons that the world has the printing press is the Jews who were expelled from Spain took the printing press to Constantinople and started printing Bibles. So George's family actually left Rhodes in 1914 because the men were afraid they were going to be drafted into the Turkish army, and of course, as Jews, they would be cannon fodder. They'd be in the front lines. And I have Swiss ancestors who left Switzerland in the 1870s because of that Franco-Prussian War in the 1870s, because the Swiss were afraid that the Prussians were going to draft them into the Prussian army, and as Swiss, they'd be put on the front lines, and they'd be cannon fodder. And so my ancestors, who were basically, you'd call them Christian freethinkers, they were not German Catholics, which were, the Kaiser was very much the Kaiser was he was also related to the royalty of Great Britain. And he was kind of pro-British, and so they were all related. But that was the other thing, Prince Edward, the one who had to, he was king, whatever. I lose that track of the numbers, but he was King Edward very briefly when he stepped down from the throne to marry, the American hussy, the divorced woman. Um, it's come out since that he was very much a fellow traveler with the Nazis. He really, like Neville Chamberlain, he was just really eager to make a peace deal with the Germans. And actually, I mean, thinking back on it, if we'd been alive back then and we had just experienced World War One, wanting to basically make peace at any cost, especially knowing now the devastation of World War II, I'm not ready to say that they were particularly wrong. I mean, I wouldn't particularly enjoy, speaking German or, uh, you know, we have that story, The Man in the High Tower,
Yes.
to show us how it might have worked out. So but the other aspect of this, which was something that I learned in junior high school, maybe the only thing in history I learned in junior high school, and I put this in the preface of the book. The wisest thing I ever heard from any teacher, well, I won't include my science teachers because there was some interesting stuff there, but the wisest thing a history teacher ever said to me was a single sentence. He said, always remember that Russia will covet warm water ports.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that too.
So if you want the reason that Russia went into Ukraine, which is not anything that you won't hear it on Fox News, you won't hear it on MS Now, you will not hear it on CNN. I don't know why nobody talks about it because it's public information. Putin has 2 sub-bases, nuclear sub-bases,
Right.
big sub-bases. One of them is in Vladivostok on one end of the country, right near Japan. The other one is in Sevastopol at the tip of the Crimea. Now, when Ukraine broke away from the Soviet Union, what did they do?
Well, they took part of it.
They gave up all their nuclear weapons.
Okay.
But that base stayed there because Russia had, let's call it a lease. I mean, at the time of the breakaway, it was a Russian puppet who ran the country. So I don't know that there was any doubt that the Ruskies would be able to park their subs there.
Right.
But once it became a populist government and it was throw the bastards out and they wanted to join NATO, what can you imagine what that meeting with NATO would have discussed? Well, guys, if you want to join NATO, how about getting rid of that friggin' subbase?
Yeah.
Well, if you were Vladimir, yeah, I suppose they could move that subbase up to where they held the Winter Olympics in the Black Sea. But there's a point of pride there too. I mean, Putin's got two goals, and I know this from reading a book by a former U.S. submariner. He said, yeah, Putin's and he also claims Putin's father was a sub commander, which surprises me because that's not the mythology I've heard, but it may in fact be true. And he says, so Putin is at bedrock, he believes in submarines. But 2 things Putin wants to do is he made a deliberate decision to prioritize oil and gas instead of manufacturing, because he knew that if he prioritized oil and gas and tried to dominate those world markets, he could amass wealth much quicker for an emerging Russia than simply trying to build manufacturing infrastructure. So don't compete with Boeing, compete with Exxon. Okay. As it turns out, to drill in Siberia now, he probably needs Exxon, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, domination of oil and gas and domination of sea lanes. Those are the 2 things that Putin really wants for the future health and happiness of the Russian Empire. You could also say that one of the reasons that our current president is possibly listening to advice from his brass. One of the reasons, they talk about Greenland and rare earth minerals. Well, also there's a little matter of the sea lanes that go right past Greenland up into the North Sea. So if you watched the last episode of The Diplomat on Netflix,
Yeah,
the
no.
last episode of The Diplomat, spoiler alert,
Sorry.
talks about how crucial it would be to, and this is all fiction, The Diplomat, but
Of course.
it's supposedly, like Homeland. It's like based on, fictionalized stuff that's going on. But protecting the sea lanes, that the Diplomat episode, and again, we're talking public information here. We're not talking about anything that anybody is disclosing. Presumably in The Diplomat, and I don't know this to be true, but in The Diplomat, one of the American officials claims that one of our crucial submarine bases is in Glasgow, Scotland, and that there is a move towards Scottish independence, and that one of the priorities of the London government that the United States has urged them to put at the top of their list is not letting Scotland secede, because their first vote would be get rid of the damn Yanks in our harbor.
Right.
So again, we've got geopolitics on slow boil here, and you realize that the Bosporus, the narrow passage at what is present day Istanbul, down through the Dardanelles into the Mediterranean, and then down through the Suez Canal. Yes, they talk about the Suez Canal as, remember when that cargo ship got stalled there?
Oh yeah.
That wasn't that long ago.
No.
So you've got shipping from all of Europe. I mean, otherwise they're going to have to do like the old Portuguese did and go around the tip of Africa. That's a rough journey, even for super tankers that might capsize. A super tanker disaster at sea is a non-trivial event. So, and then also critical, the Gulf of Hormuz. There is a strategic location right in the middle of that Gulf, Karg Island, which is the place where the Iranians bring a pipeline out from their oil fields, because the super tankers can't go in all the way. They bring an oil pipeline out through the sea and up to Karg Island, and there are pumping stations there. And the Iranian super tankers load up at Karg Island. Now, that used to be property of Amoco, which became BP.
Right.
But when the Revolutionary Guard took over, the Islamists took over, the Americans had to sell their rights to that island back to the Iranian regime. So there was a time when we controlled, that very critical piece of real estate. And so, everything that's going on today is focusing on that particular part of the map. I mean, as we speak, you've got what, 2 U.S. supercarriers in that region, and yeah. Oh well, I mean, yeah. My carry emphasis on groups just because of modern technology is, whether it be a super tanker or a troop carrier, that is a bathtub. That is a vulnerable bathtub. Okay,
Yeah.
you need an escort group. And my dad was a lieutenant junior grade in the U.S. Navy in the Pacific, and he used to tell me, he says, well, our boat was called an LST, large slow target, and so it was basically a hollow ship that carried thousands of men and tanks and transport vehicles.
Right.
So it went all the way across the Pacific with an escort, and they would open the front door, and the troops and the vehicles would go out to Guadalcanal, Okinawa, But then what would happen to the ship? My dad's ship would turn around and head back to San Francisco. Well, they're kind of expendable at that point.
So they would
maybe
get
the full
yes.
maybe the full escort group has got bigger names to defend at that particular time. And you know, I've been fascinated by that history too. I mean, the irony of my dad's situation was he got into the war kind of late. I don't know. I think it was in for 1 or 2 years, but then his tour wasn't up at the end of the war, and so he was actually stationed in the occupation force in Japan on MacArthur's staff, and because he was an engineer and had some, uh, you could say it's a manufacturing background. He's more of a chemical engineer than a mechanical engineer, but his job in Japan was to go around from one weapons manufacturer to another, from one factory to another, and hold classes with Japanese engineers on how to make peacetime consumer goods. So I never realized until later there was a reason that when I was growing, I was the first child after the war. I have two younger brothers, but I didn't really realize until later why I had a toy box in my basement full of tin cars. Those you and you're probably too young to know. I mean, some of our audience will know what they call friction-driven toys. Where they had a mechanical motor with a flywheel,
Right.
okay, and a spring, and so you would do this with them. You would do this with them along the carpet, okay, and then you would set them down, and they would race across the room. Before the bodies of these weren't plastic. That was before the oil companies realized plastic could be a thing for anything besides bags.
Sure.
and bent tin and then painted with the side of a dump truck or a school bus or whatever. That was the toy. And a lot of people don't, in let's say in the green movement, and my dad ended up in the oil business, but so it's hard for me to preach on this subject, but and I don't. But one of the things that I hear people say, kind of in the grocery store, is, well, let's get rid of plastic so we can get rid of oil. The thing that you don't maybe understand is that the main reason that we drill for oil is jet fuel and gasoline.
Right.
And jet fuel and gasoline are what comes up out. The oil is refined in what they call a catalytic cracker, which is a tall tower. And what you do is you boil the crude oil at the bottom, and the vapors go up, and the basic principles of evaporation will cause the lightest chemicals to go to the top. And so you can siphon those off. So the top stuff that comes off is jet fuel and kerosene, the thin stuff. Okay, JP4 kerosene. The next stuff that comes off is gasoline. The next stuff that comes off is the stuff that you mix into diesel fuel. So plastics and asphalt are the sludge at the bottom. The asphalt they kind of knew what to do with because Hitler figured out how to make superhighways and came over here to study the Pasadena freeway before we knew he was an enemy, right? So asphalt they knew what to do with, but the sludge between the asphalt and the other sweet stuff, that's what's plastic. So basically, they would have thrown that stuff away. It would have been nobody is going to drill for oil if the only reason is to make kitty cars and plastic bags. It's just not going to happen. There are plenty of other things you can use corn for that. I mean, we're eating with corn utensils these days. The other thing that is and again, also not top secret. The other thing is that my dad had shared with me, and actually it was in the 60s, that back you could basically take crude oil and mix it in a vat with bacteria, and you can make all kinds of protein. He says you can make fake meat all day long, just making it out of crude oil. And he said, but the problem is the stuff they make is like white and tasteless. So you got to flavor it like soybeans, like ham, chicken, whatever. And so the other thing, is that the headquarters was in Chicago at the time, and so was McDonald's. And they approached McDonald's, and McDonald's goes, "We're all beef. No way. No way. No way." And that still may be true. I don't know. The other irony is that at the time, every McDonald's that sprung up in that area, among the first, was on a lot that the oil companies had options on. They had done all these studies on high traffic corners, high traffic real estate, and it turned out they only wanted the ones on the corner for the gas stations. The ones in the middle block became McDonald's. High traffic, somebody did their research way before AI. So
Absolutely. All right, well, Gerald, we're coming up on the clock here. So, what's next on the frontier for you? So, another historical.
Jonathan's Journal comes out April the 14th, Amazon Kindle paperback. I will be at the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books the following Saturday, the 18th, signing books and greeting your fans. And I'll be hanging out in the Writers and Publishers Network booth, and you can look. You won't be able to look up Gerald Everett Jones probably, but you'll definitely be able to look up WPN. So find that booth on Truscott and stop by and say hi. And I've got some. My dad was a fan of an amateur historian in biblical archaeology, and he has a book called Searching for Jonah that I helped him publish. And I've gotten into the ancient history, especially of the first century, and some of the basically during the time when Christians didn't realize that they weren't Jews. They basically thought they were very spiritual Jews. And I was raised a Southern Baptist, and between the whole, I have a mystery series called the Preacher Evan Wycliffe series, and it's about an agnostic Baptist minister in Southern Missouri. So that book is kind of interesting by definition, right?
Well, we'll talk about that. I'd like to talk to you about that one.
Oh yeah, there's a lot about. His paper was on the Book of Revelations at Harvard Divinity School, so there's a lot to say about that.
All right. Well,
Indeed.
we'll have you back on the show. Talk about that. I'm very interested in that subject. I hear an echo again. It's driving me nuts.
And
So-
it could all be,
Well, we'll
could all
find out.
be there. And if it starts with the voices and we're not on have these on, then
It's all up. Well,
911. Yeah.
There you go. So, Gerald, who's somebody that you respect right now, and what are they doing that inspires you?
My greatest respect for writers was actually John le Carré of recent demise. But I will say that his stuff that has been turned into films and series, his son did a very good job of writing the sequel to the George Smiley books, Nick Carraway, and all of the literature that's been done. I mean, actually, even the new series, The Night Manager, which le Carré had written. The Night Manager was one of my favorite books, but then the follow-on episodes that were produced after his death. I don't know that Nick was involved, but his other children were involved as executive producers on the series, so I know they had script approval. But le Carré teaches you to read between the lines. George Smiley is the close observer. What are readers? Close observers.
Great point. I wish we'd have talked about that sooner. Love to dig into that with you. But so where can people go to find out more about you and about your work, sir?
GeraldEverettJones.com. Gerald with a G, Everett with two T's. And yeah, find me there. I'm also on Substack at Gerald Everett Jones. So I tend to rant from time to time there. And I have a podcast, Get Published Radio, which I've been the host of. And that's got some interesting folks on there. So
Well, I'll
yeah,
definitely check that out for sure. And I know we have your website already on the show notes, but I don't have your Substack, so we'll have to get that and we'll add that to the show
that's
notes as
at
well.
Gerald Everett Jones on Substack.
Outstanding. So
So
we'll make sure we get that added as well, sir. All right. So do you want to hang out backstage for a minute while I close up the show, and I'll
well, sure.
touch base with you
Sure.
back
Well,
after?
we'll do the next hour, and and then you can take your Prozac and go to bed.
All right. All right. All right. All right. I'll see you backstage, my friend.
Okay.
Gerald Everett Jones, folks. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. It's been great. All right, folks. It's tax season. And as we all know, taxation is theft, but you still have to file your tax returns. And the folks over at Diamond Dynasty Tax Group Legacy want to help you do that. Diamond Dynasty Tax Group Legacy is a local business here in Eagle Pass. You can give them a call at 830-867-7106. It's 830-867-7106. These folks did my taxes for me last year when we first purchased the asylum and renovated it and built the studio and all that stuff. And I gave them a folder of receipts about that big. And they took all of that and they went through it one by one, and they did a fantastic job in minimizing my stress, maximizing the return, and they just did a fantastic job all around. Made it very, very simple. So check them out. Give them a call. Diamond Dynasty Tax Group Legacy, 830-867-7106. And look, you don't have to be in Eagle Pass to use their services. They will take care of you no matter where you're from. So give them a call, 830-867-7106. Make sure you tell them you heard it here on the Joe Roos Show. All right. This way, they'll still do my taxes for free now. So there we go. All right. Make sure you tell them you heard it here. All right. All right. All right. Shout outs, of course, to our executive producers, Wayne Rankin, Rosanna Rankin, Carolina Jimenez, Marissa Lee, Anonymous Angela. Thank you so much for all of the effort that you guys put into putting these shows together. I really do appreciate it. And folks, what they do is they donate their time, their talent, their treasure. We call it the 3Ts. And you can do the same thing too. And if you want to help us out, just head over to our website, joeroos.com/support, just joeroos.com/support. And you can look at all the different ways that you can help us out. We have different tiers and so on and so forth. It's all there. Read it. And if you have the means to do it, and if you want to do it, jump on board. Now, look, the producers get the shout out on every show. So if you sign up as a producer of the show, you get your name shout out across the internet, across the podcast world, across all these wonderful places where this show is heard. 81 countries, by the way. So check it out. You get the shout out on every show. You get included in all the show notes. You get included in emails that go out from the show because you are producing the show. And if you sign up as an executive producer, you get to come on the show with us. You get to spend an hour with us. And like we do on Wednesday night, we have Wednesdays with Wayne Rankin, the only one of the executive producers with the guts. I was going to say something else, but the guts to come onto the show with us. And we have a great time. We have a lot of fun, and his incredible insight. And he's working on projects, and he tells us all about them. So check it out. If you have the means to do it, and you can, I appreciate it. If not, no worries. Just like, subscribe, and share the show with your friends, your family, and followers. That way you can help us out. All right. One of the most dangerous things a person can do is stop asking questions, because when you stop asking questions, you stop searching. And when you stop searching, you start accepting whatever version of reality gets handed to you. History isn't just dates. It's not just events. It's choices. Choices made by people. People driven by fear. People driven by ambition, by hope, survival. And storytelling, real storytelling, does something powerful. It lets you step outside yourself. It lets you see the world through a different lens. It reminds you that truth isn't always obvious. Meaning isn't always comfortable. But you know something? That's where growth lives. Every person listening tonight has a story. Every one of you is part of something bigger than yourself. Part of a chain that stretches backward through generations and forward into the future. The question is, Are you living consciously, or are you just drifting through someone else's narrative? That's a question that only you can answer. All right? All right. Well, folks, that does it for me. That's all I've got for you for tonight. Don't forget to head over to the website, joeroos.com. Let us know what you think. Any questions, comments, cares, or concerns. All righty, folks. Listen, don't forget, make Texas independent again. Go podcasting. Keep a steady stride. More importantly, keep talking. We'll see you tomorrow night, folks.